Good morning, everybody. I'm going to do this talk in English, obviously. I still have to practice my Italian, but in enough years we'll get there. Quick introduction. This is me. I'm open to all the conversations. My role is professional services. I'm talking with all these different customers, and the beauty of it is you get all the stories that you can reshare again with other people you're talking to. So besides this, I love climbing, I like building stuff, so for all these things I like to engage and have the conversations. Today I might challenge your thinking for a little bit. I think some of you are already on the journey, but please join me on this new paradigm. I think most of you, in the Netherlands, if you're on the beach and you're looking at the sunset, you see these windmills in the distance. And they provide clean energy, which we're really thankful for, but that doesn't go by itself. No, we need to maintain those things. And to train the people that need to maintain it, it's quite costly to constantly sail them out to sea, have them stay there, and put a windmill on hold so it doesn't create energy. So the company who's doing this thought, okay, well, we should do this different. But how? How can we do this different? How can we train our people without putting the windmill on hold? And before doing that, they started taking a step back. Think, okay, what do we want to achieve? Well, first we want to make sure that the engineer is able to complete a task, a pre-described task of maintaining the clutch, for example. And obviously that needs to happen under a set of conditions. Maybe there's a particular fault, or maybe it's stormy weather, so there's different dangers that you have to consider. So all of these variables that can change how you should execute the task. And then last but not least, to know if you've done a good job of it, if you achieve the quality that you want to achieve, we need to set a standard. And if I look at this through my eyes, it's much as testing software, right? There's an application, it needs to achieve a certain task under a set of conditions, and that needs to be successful. Only then we're confident that we can release it into our actual environment. So this is basically what they came up with. They said, okay, what do we have available? What can we control? And they use virtual reality, in this case virtual reality goggles, to train the people to achieve those tasks. And the trainer can train multiple people at the same time. You don't need to put a windmill on hold. So it's quite efficient to train people that way. And you only need to sail out to sea maybe once or twice to do it in real. It's like a user acceptance test in my head. Now, they're not the only one doing this. I think if we look around us, we see all these different environments where people use virtual reality in one shape or form to train people, to make sure that they're ready to go out in the real world and complete their tasks successfully, much like we're building our software or integrating our software. So with this in mind, I start wondering, okay, well, we're living in a digital space. So in a virtual world, what does virtual reality look like? Because it's all digital, it's still the ones and zeros. So I started by looking up the definition of the environments that we have available to us when we're developing software. And I chose test environment management because that's more of the complete definition. And Wikipedia gives us this definition where they say it needs to be a validated, it needs to be a stable environment, and thus usable to execute test scenarios, or in a different scenario, to replicate bugs or defects that we found. Now, if we go a little bit deeper into this and all the conversations that I'm having, the first question is, okay, well, guys, this environment, it's shared, right? You're sharing this with different teams. And how often did I not get the feedback that the defect wasn't the defect? No, it was a colleague that already used your test data or that you prepared. So you can say, well, a shared environment, is that a stable environment? Generally, no. that actually goes beyond the point that maybe a colleague released a new functionality in your environment. And then you think, okay, well, it hasn't been validated. I don't really know what I'm testing against. Okay, so if it's not stable, if it's not validated, can we say it's usable? Well, I would argue no. And if we don't have control over it, the last thing is we can try to replicate a bug, but that is really playing the lottery. So in essence, what do we have available to us? An environment to run tests in. But then we can't really say something about the quality. The level of confidence is really, really low. Okay, so it isn't all that bad. This is a reason to investigate. How can we do things different? How can we do things better? What can we learn from the different industries that we just talked about? Now, the World Quality Report is an annual thing, and Micro Focus brings this out, reports this as well. And if you go through the report, what you find is that test environment management, and this was previous year, this was actually the latest one, what's really important here is they focus on, and this is on top of mind of all the CTOs or the high-level management, that is really important to get an environment that's fit for purpose. Not just a shared environment in which you can play around. So instead of, today I'm not going to give you a technical brief on how you could do this. I think it's not the time and space to do this, but I would like to give you a starting point. And that starting point for me is just to give some real life examples in the conversations that I've been having. And one of the customers that then I'm allowed to walk the floor is ING. And ING said, well, we want to create a bank in a box. And yeah, you go into the conversation and think, okay, well, what do you mean with that? Why do you want that? And they said, well, we have our developers. And we have a lot of developers. And we have a lot of evolution of the software constantly. But they're traveling. They may be working remote. They may be working at home these days. Well, not so much anymore. And actually, we don't care where they work, but we do want them to have access to a validated, stable, usable environment. How are you going to manage that if you don't have internet, if you don't have connectivity? So with this idea, they were playing around, and at a certain point, we were invited to the conversation. And they said, well, how are we going to put this in a box? This is actually not their environment. This is of a global retailer, but it paints the picture, right? You have this complex architecture, and you need a lot of hardware, and you need mainframes to actually run this. How on earth are you going to run this on a simple MacBook? Is it possible? Well, it is. But then you have to think in restrictions. You have to start reinventing yourself. So what they did, they said, okay, well, we have all these different environments. We have all these different integration points, and we just create simulations of it. Because we can deduce based on what we want to validate, what use cases we want to support, what data we need, but we don't need the computing power to actually get to those results. It doesn't need to be production. It can be a simplistic form of it. So they created simulations using service virtualization as a technology. And for those who are not familiar, basically you have mocking and stubbing, which is a simple request response. And service virtualization is like a second generation, third generation of mocking and stubbing. So they continued on. And why was this important? Or in which case did we actually start using this? We have all of these different business functions, let's say, and one of them is mortgages. And the mortgage function said, okay, well, let us start. So they started integrating all of their dependent systems. And, oh, sorry, actually I have to go one step back. They use a package-based solution. So they don't develop their own software, they purchase their software. So they get a package from their vendor, and then every time they get a new version, they need to test it. The supplier says, it's good to go. And then they receive it, ING tests themselves, but it's not good to go because the vendor is testing differently than they are testing. They have different data. ING has evolved. So, okay, now we need to battle that. So what they said, we put our bank in a box. We give our bank in a box to our vendor. Our vendor creates the software, tests the software like we would, and then they give it back. And that way we only need to validate that, that the configuration is right. We don't need to focus on functionality anymore. So this is one use case where they actually achieved to start small, to create their bank in a box. And the next steps is to evolve this throughout the rest of the bank. So if you look at what ING has achieved in this particular case, they said, well, you know, let's create a validated environment. All of the versions of the APIs are validated when they were put in the box. You're the only one using it because it's your dedicated environment. It's running on your own laptop, if you even want. So with that, it's stable. Nobody is interfering with your data or with the applications. So with that, again, we can argue, okay, this is usable. We can test against this. And the beauty of it, if you control the data underneath the simulations, you can get the data from, let's say, production or production incident, and then you can really replicate a bug properly. So with that, ING is again back in control. And one of the things that I really like in the conversations that he talks about, it's what's important for him is not the price. It's not the time to market. He has his business partner. He wants to be trustworthy. So the term he uses is delivery predictability. The delivery of software has become predictable again. We deliver tomorrow, and they deliver tomorrow. It's not contingencies or delays. No, he's in control. And that's the most important thing for him. Now, these can be quite lagging, dragging projects, taking a lot of time to build all of those integrations. And I was actually proved wrong by that, by a customer of ours that recently became a customer. And I don't have the whole use case set out for you to read, but I do have this. And these graphs show, for me, that implementing a technology such as service virtualization, implementing simulations to take control, doesn't need to take a long time. We said there was a laser pointer, and I want to point one thing out. Around this time, so around halfway the graph, up till that is a pilot. After that, they actually purchased software, service virtualization, to start using it. And with that, and the most important things I want to point out in this graph is they've now reached 1 million transactions per month that they support different teams. And one of the teams is a private bank. They have the mortgages department, they have the cards department, and they're onboarding all these different teams. They're not even doing performance testing yet. So within half a year, they've unleashed the value of taking control. Now, to me, personally, I think this is really impressive. Because generally, these are 2 or 3 year projects before you get the real functionality and get the real value. So it can be done fast. Now, what have they achieved? Together with QA Financial, we thought, is there actually value in the software that we're bringing to the market? And luckily, they were able to say, yes, there is. Because ING, Bank of America, and Santander as well, they were able to achieve a 40% reduction in their software development. Just that contingency that we were talking about, the delays, they don't have those delays, allowing them to, well, what's really important in their situation is they have trouble finding people to develop software. So now they can do more with less people, which is really important for them. But you still have the traditional benefits of time to market, less cost, etc., etc. So I think this report really shows delivered predictability, is possible. We don't always need to budget for delay. So I wanted to share this with you, and there's a QR code if you want to scan it. I have it with me today as well on the floor, so if you want to have a look at it during the break. But this is really why they do it. So if you're curious, how would I get started? What is the starting point? Together with ING, we actually built a customer journey. We said, okay, well, what decisions do you have to make? How do you start? How do you go about this? Because you have people, you have data, you have environments. And together with ING, we built this customer journey that really helps you understand, okay, if I want to get started, these are the important questions to ask yourself. So with that, I want to leave you today. I hope this can be a starting point of a new journey for you to start exploring. If you have more questions, feel free to approach me, and I'm happy to answer that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jochem. Just another question to you. I don't know if you can answer to that, but it's just a consideration, I think, about the virtual reality. And you said you train technical competencies, but how do you train psychological competencies with to reality? You know, it's an example work at the windmills during critical weather conditions. So just consideration about the use of virtual reality.
So I didn't really get. Was it about psychological aspects?
Technical competencies, but psychological competencies is maybe much difficult. No?
Yeah. No, change has a lot of impact, and this paradigm shift, and that's why I want to talk about it today as well, that's the most difficult one. There's still a lot of misconception about what SV is, or service virtualization is. So, for example, at Santander, the CIO approved the entire project. And the next step is, okay, well, we need environments. And the CTO said, nope, not going to do it. I don't need more systems on my network because that's going to create instability. So we took the time, talked to him, explained how we could actually help him achieve a more stable network. Because they were experiencing outages in production. So it takes a lot of evangelizing, it takes a lot of time, which none of us have, but to sit down and to understand it. And if you, the Santander example, what's really important, we took the time to talk to the different people, sit down, but we also said, well, let's not talk too much. We're going to show you. We're going to show you results. And that, together with the support of all management, that allowed us to show, yes, it works.
Thanks.